And so, flawed but called. Who here feels that there are some deep flaws in our life? Some missteps, some mistakes, some character flaws, some idiosyncrasies that bother people. Anybody? Yeah, we all have them, or we're flawed. None of us here are perfect, and so we've got challenges in our life. But yet, God, amidst our flaws, calls us to great things and to accomplish great things. And so in this teaching series, we've been studying a gentleman by the name of David in the Old Testament. David was one of the greatest leaders in the Old Testament. He was known as a man after God's own heart. But yet, we learn in his story that he was also a deep, flawed individual. He made some pretty big blunders along the way, and yet God's grace was sufficient to him. Now, I think that one of the key reasons why David was so successful was because he had some great people in his life. He had some great friends. One in particular that I want to highlight is this friendship that he had with a man named Jonathan. This was such a great friendship that on Father's Day, I thought it would be great for us to talk about this thing called friendship. Now, guys, let's face it. We tend to not be so good at this stuff. Ladies, you guys are better at it when it comes to building, effective and nurturing and vibrant relationships with each other. Us guys, we tend to be doers, so we get to do stuff, but sometimes we lack in our ability to invest in key and critical friendships that are nurturing in our lives. And so I want us to talk about this key piece in all of our lives, and that is friendship. It wasn't long ago that GQ magazine interviewed Kobe Bryant, a well-known NBA star, and it was kind of an awkward question to ask an NBA star, but the reporter did anyways and says, "Hey, Kobe, do you have any friends?" Great question. Do you have any friends? I mean, you're a superstar. You've got a lot of trophies. And do you have any friends? And this was his response. He says, "I have like minds. You know, I've been fortunate to play in Los Angeles where there are lots of people like me, actors, musicians, businessmen, obsessive people who feel like God put them on the earth to do whatever it is that they do." Now, do we have time to build great friendships or relationships? Do we have time to build great friendships? No. Do we have time to socialize and to hang out aimlessly? No. Do we want to do that? No. We want to work. I enjoy working. I think that is true of many of us, if we're honest. We tend to be good at our work, but when it comes to friendships and relationships, we can sometimes lack. The reporter just kept badgering him about this and went on to say, but are you okay with that? Are you okay with the fact that there might be a lack of friendship and maybe an element of loneliness in your life? Kobe Bryant lonely? Is that possible? And he said, it's not something I'm proud of. He goes on to say, it's actually one of my weaknesses in my life. The lack of friendships in my life is a weakness, and it's something I want to do better at. You see, this thing called friendship is really critical in every single one of our lives, including mine today. In fact, it's what keeps us alive. There's a Harvard study that has been a 72-year-long study, and it asks the question, what really makes human beings happy? What really makes us happy? And you know what the result of all this accumulated data and information from Harvard was? It's this, that the only thing that really matters in life are your relationships to other people. More than any accomplishment, more than any career, more than any material accumulation, more than anything else, it's the relationships in our lives. Yet, my hunch is there's a tragedy there. There's a gap there. We tend to invest most and the bulk of our identity and time into accumulating and being successful rather than investing in friendships, relationships, human relationships. Isn't that ironic? We live in the most connected world with social media than ever before, yet there are indications and studies that tell us that North Americans are some of the loneliest people on the planet. What's going on there? something has gone awry there. In fact, further studies are showing, researcher Daniel Goleman has concluded, a scientist, that the most fundamental revelation of the discipline of neurobiology is that we are wired to connect. Neuroscience has discovered that our brain's very design, the way God wired us, makes us sociable, inexorably drawn into an intimate brain-to-brain link-up whenever we engage with another person. God has hardwired us to be social, to be relational, to need relationship in our life. And when those wires get crossed or unmet, something in us dies. And there is no doubt that one of the key pieces to David's success was his friendship with Jonathan. In fact, our text is 1 Samuel chapter 20. If you have your Bibles there, I encourage you to open up your Bible and go there. If you don't have a Bible, there are some in some of the seats, and the text will come out on the screen as well. And we'll bounce around in a few passages, but our main text is chapter 20 of 1 Samuel. And we see this amazing opening 2 verses that indicate that friends literally keep us alive in this case. Notice what it says in verse 1 and 2. Then David fled from Naioth and Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to kill me?" Now, to have your best friend be the son of your greatest enemy, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? It actually shows Jonathan's character. He was the prince. He was to be the next in line to be king, yet he was okay with sitting in the second chair and having David become the king. Shows a lot related to their friendship. And so David is telling Jonathan, "Hey, what have I done? Why is your dad after me?" And this is what Jonathan says, and I love this statement. He says, "Never." Jonathan says to David, "You are not going to die." That's a beautiful statement. Physically, this was a reality in David's life, but that's what friends do. They keep us alive. They're the type of people that speak into our life. They get in our face and tell us the truth. They tell us our purpose. They remind us of why we're on the planet. I've heard this in the last week, that you got to remember 2 dates in your life: the day you were born and the day you realized why you were born. Why are you on the planet? The purpose to your life. Friends remind us of our purpose. Friendships encourage us, inspire us. They speak faith into our lives. They're the kind of people who walk in those desolate moments in our life and those deserted seasons in our life, those seasons where there's lots of questioning, lots of doubt, whether from within or without, wondering what the point to all this is, shaking in our faith potentially. Those are those moments when those friends walk into our life and say, "Hold the phone, bro. We need to talk about some truth here." The fact of the matter is, God has a purpose for your life. In fact, He created you in your mother's womb, and every day of your life is ordained already. Every step is ordained in your life. Friends come in and say, "Can I encourage you? Can I speak life into you?" Where there have been words spoken over your life that are taking you down, friends walk in and replace them with the truth of God. They encourage us, inspire us. They're the kind of people that if something happened at 3:30 in the morning, you can phone and they'll answer the phone and they'll put on a pot of coffee and they'll say, "Come on over," and you'll chat. Those are the kinds of friends we're talking about. Jonathan and David had that kind of friendship where they would be in each other's corner. They would watch each other's back. They would encourage. They would inspire. They would speak faith into our lives. Here's an example in chapter 23 of 1 Samuel 15 to 17. I love this verse. Listen to these words. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Siph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan, when he had heard this, went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. And he said to him, don't be afraid. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows that this is going to happen. I love that. He went to David so that he can help him find strength in God. That's what a friendship looks like. Friends keep us alive. In the midst of difficult situations, they come and they gather and they talk and help us find strength in God. They come and they pray. They come and they listen. They come and they support. They help us find strength in God. I need those friends. You need those friends. Would you agree? But my concern is that many of us don't have them. My concern is many of us aren't those kinds of friends to others because we're so busy that we don't have any time to invest in people. And yet what really will make us happy, as the statistics and the research shows, is that we would have meaningful relationship in our lives. And yet it seems like it's the one thing that we seem to not be able to grab hold of in our lives. Jonathan helped David find strength in the Lord. Friends, there is some real serious research that's coming up that is pointing that loneliness is something that's killing us. I want you to listen to some of this. In recent research, loneliness has doubled. It's up to 40%, that 40% of people would say that I deal with isolation, with loneliness, without those meaningful relationships in our life. And it's causing us serious health risks. Okay, watch this. One of those health risks are pointed to this. Studies of elderly people and social isolation concluded that those without adequate social interaction were twice as likely to die early. Here's another point. The increased mortality risk from loneliness is comparable to that of smoking and twice as dangerous as obesity. This is serious, isn't it? Here's a third piece. Social isolation impairs immune function and boosts inflammation in our body, which can lead to arthritis, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. Friends, loneliness has huge ramifications in our life. When we don't have those meaningful friendships and relationships in our life, we literally reap physical consequences of that because God has wired us physiologically to be people in relationship, in trusting friendships. And when we isolate ourselves, part of us literally begins to die. Loneliness is not just making us sick, it's killing us. Sadly, as a culture, we rarely talk about it. And one professor, researcher at the University of Chicago, I said, the reason why we don't talk about it is because, and he quotes, admitting you are lonely is like holding a big L for loser on your forehead. And so because of that, guess what? We don't talk about it. We just figure, you know, you seem to be a happy person. You get a lot of likes on Facebook. You have a lot of followers on Twitter. You must have amazing friends. But really, many of us deep down have a gap. If Kobe Bryant has gaps, my hunch is many of us do too. Where there's part of us that are literally dying because we're not being replenished by those friendships where we can go to and find strength in the Lord together. Further to this study and research that I've come across, researchers are focusing in on these horrible violent acts of crime and murder that are happening in our world. And they've been studying the culprits, the criminals that have been shooting, in particular those in schools and so on. And many of them are boys, young men. And so the research is pointing to these young men and studying them and asking them some very important questions. And what these shooters are telling these Secret Service investigators and psychologists is that they have feelings of alienation and persecution which drove them to violence. Something in them broke and cracked because there has been isolation without healthy relationship in their life. It's easy to label shooters as evil, but miss some of the less noticeable signs that many boys are struggling alone in our culture. I want you to listen to these statistics because it's alarming. Boys get expelled from preschool nearly 5 times more often than girls. In elementary school, boys are diagnosed with learning disorders 4 times as often. By 8th grade, huge numbers of boys read below basic level. Males graduate high school at lower rates and attend college right out of high school at lower rates. Young men are 3 times more likely to take their lives than young women. Friends, our men and our young boys need mentors, people who will invest in their life and show them what healthy friendships are like, rather than being in isolation behind their iPads and game consoles. It's an epidemic, friend. And being a dad who's raising 3 boys, they need a dad who's fully engaged in them and with them. But those boys also need other mentors in their life that will lead them in the right direction. Friends keep us alive. Jonathan gets in David's face and says, "You are not going to die." In David's darkest moment, Jonathan hunts him down and says, "I'm here, and I'm here to help you be strengthened in the Lord. Don't you worry, fear not. You will be the next king, and I'll be the next in command, and my dad knows it already." Friendships keep us alive. And we need to rearrange our lives, our schedules, whatever we need to do to make sure we're investing in those relationships and friendships in our lives. Secondly, friends are fully committed. Friends are fully committed to each other. Now, that commitment word is sometimes a foreign concept in our culture. We tend to like to be on the receiving side of friendship. What can I get out of this friendship? In fact, I want to be that person's friend because of what they can help me do and accomplish, rather than what can I give to this friendship? What do I have to offer in this friendship? You see, friendship that's committed is a 2-way road. It's not a 1-way street. In fact, any friendships that we have that tend to be you giving, and never receiving has an expiry date on it. Look at this committed friendship between David and Jonathan. It was a 2-way street. Verse 4 of chapter 20, Jonathan said to David, I love this statement, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you." We need those people in our life. Hey, I'm here for you. Whatever you need, you can count on me. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. Beautiful words, isn't it? Whatever you need, whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you. You see, committed friendships celebrate the victories together and grieve together through the great defeats of life. They stick with each other through the highs and the lows of life. We realize that life's never always up and to the right and everything's going great. There's ups and downs. Friends stick closer. They stick through the ups. They stick through the downs. Notice in chapter 40 or verse 41 of chapter 20, after the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and he bowed down before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. Look at the appreciation. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. This was a common greeting between gentlemen in this culture. If I went to an Italian church, it wouldn't be rare for 2 men to greet each other with a kiss on both cheeks, so we don't need to be alarmed here. This was friendship. It wasn't romantic. In fact, the Hebrew words that are used there are pointing to a friendship, not a romantic relationship in this case. David and Jonathan made a deep commitment to each other. The scriptures say in chapter 20, verse 42, Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship and with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever." And then David left, and Jonathan went back to his town. They made a commitment. They had an agreement. We're going to watch each other's back no matter what. That's what a committed friendship looks like. Now, it's interesting that research is showing that one of our most popular topics of discussion is, what do you think? Is it food? What do we like to talk about with people? Is it food? Is it travel? Is it sports? Is it whatever it is? No, none of those. You know what our greatest topic of discussion is? Ourselves. We love to talk about ourselves. Well, that's a problem in a committed friendship if all you want to talk about is you. You ever get in those conversations? It's like you bring something up and it's like, oh, yeah, and it goes on about a story about themselves. And it's like every detail that you really don't care about knowing. And then you'll try to bring the conversation back and it goes right back to themselves again. Maybe we're like that. Because the research is showing that we all have a tendency to like to talk about ourselves. But in a committed friendship, it's got to go beyond ourselves and what we get out of those friendships. It's got to be something that's mutual. It's something that are committed together. It's got to be a road that goes from one side to the next and back to the other side. Healthy friendships are always a two-way street. And we see it over and over again in this friendship between Jonathan and David. Look at verse 14 and 15. Jonathan says to David, "But show me unfailing kindness." I love that phrase. Unfailing kindness, like the Lord's kindness, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. They had this agreement, and Jonathan asks for unfailing kindness. Friend, that's a key phrase. The Hebrew word that's used there is the word hesed. That's what unfailing kindness is, which means steadfast, enduring, loyal. That's what Jonathan was asking of David. Be steadfast with me. Be loyal with me. Endure with me. In fact, the word hesed is the equivalent to, in the New Testament, when it speaks of Christ's love and kindness to us. It's steadfast. It's loyal. It's enduring. It endures even when we mess up. His love is unfailing. His kindness is unfailing. And so in many ways, John is saying, can you show me the same love that comes from the Father in our friendship? Who of us has not received this kind of loving kindness, this unfailing kindness from God in your life? He's endured with you. He's been faithful to you. He's exhibited kindness to you. He's loyal to you, even though at times we're disloyal to him. And the scripture's saying that same kind of loving kindness that you've received, begin to exemplify it in your human relationships. And so it alludes to that. Friends are committed to helping each other grow in their spiritual lives. And this is an important point. So friendships that I'm speaking of today have a whole lot more to do than just talking about sports, although finding those affinities that we have with people are a great first step in building a great friendship. Finding people that have the same hobbies or interests get you going and moving together in the right direction. But it's got to get deeper than that at some point. I mean, the J's are great, but they're just not going to cut it in my heart, right? Those conversations have to, at times, move deeper than that, where, as Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. That's what a spiritual friendship looks like, where there's two individuals that are pushing each other forward in their relationship with God. You see, the reverse can be true. We can have certain friends that are not good for us. Bad company can corrupt good character, the scriptures teach us. Sometimes we got to evaluate who's in our life and are they helping us move forward in our relationship with God. We need those relationships in our lives because we're weak, and we need to have those sharpening relationships where friends that will actually tell you the truth. Friends who will get in your face at times and say, hey, you got a blind spot there. That's a character flaw. Friends who love you will point it out. But they won't just point it out, they'll then help you overcome. We need those, don't we? I have relationships and friendships in my life where they point out things that help me pursue more of God in my life. I need that. And at first it kind of stings. It's like, what did you just say to me? But I know that they've earned a right, in a sense, to speak into my life. They've been a friend for years. And so at times friends will put up the mirror and say, hey, I got a concern here. And rather than back away from those moments, back into those moments, because those are iron sharpening iron moments. People who love you will tell you the truth. If you're standing on the tracks and a train's coming, a friend will say, get out of the way. And if you're not moving, they might dive out and knock you out of the way. Friends who know that you've got some issues with sin and there's some challenges there, and the way maybe I'm treating my children or my spouse or how I'm doing business, and maybe there's some lack of integrity there. True friends who help me become more like Christ will point them out and then say, let's get out of this rut. They won't just stand there and say, oh, well, I'm here to support you no matter what. No, they're going to die if they stay on the tracks. And true friends get us off of the tracks so that we stay alive. Thirdly, this morning, friends advocate on our behalf. I love this. Friends advocate on our behalf. We need some advocates in our life. We need some friends that'll stand up for us. We try to teach this to our boys. When they see boys bullying other boys, stand up, protect, get help. We need friends who advocate. Notice verse 32 of chapter 20. Jonathan speaking to his dad, Saul, who's after David, and he says, hey, why should he be put to death, Dad? What has he done? He's advocating for David to his very own father. What has he done? If anything, he's helped you. He's blessed your leadership. He's blessed the kingdom. Why are you after his life? He shouldn't need to die. He advocates for his friend, David. As we advocate for one another, let's not divide each other, but rather build bridges towards each other. So here's Christian advocacy. We stand up for each other, but we don't draw enemy lines. Okay? So let's say I got a friend, and somebody blindsides my friend. I'm going to be an advocate of my friend. Hey, whoa, this is my friend. And he matters to me, and the way you spoke to him is not a good thing. Now, the point is that I don't just become enemies of those people, and they have found their own advocates, and next thing you know, it's us against them. No. We advocate, but then we build bridges. We advocate for each other, but then we say, hey, listen, it's kind of like a church. We're a community of friends. And when things happen that hurt each other, we don't just draw each other's camps and say it's Team A against Team B, but we say, hey, listen, we advocate, but then we build bridge because we want to reconcile the friendships and the relationships in our church community and in our community at large. So we don't dig our heels down and advocate and judge, but we advocate and then build bridges. You see, we need to remember that Jesus is a friend of sinners. We need to remember that Jesus calls us to love even our enemies. So good friends will advocate, but then they'll say, now listen, we got to get reconciled. We got to make things right. We got to build bridges because that's the Jesus way. Friends who want us to grow won't just advocate and then say, yeah, those people, you just stay away from them. They're your enemy. No, Jesus says, love your enemy. So they advocate for you, but then say, now, how do we build a bridge in these relationships? You see, conflict is inevitable. Would you agree? Well, that was weak. Conflict is inevitable. It'll happen. It's not a matter, will it happen? It will happen. Things will happen in our lives where there will be conflict and disagreement even amidst friends. What happens when that happens? What are we supposed to do? If there's one thing that's tragic that I see sometimes is these beautiful friends for years, and something happens, and then They disengage. And you see the pain of that and the hurt of that. It affects entire families. Well, Jesus kind of was proactive. I love the teachings of Jesus because they're so relevant and practical. So he says one day in his teaching, he says, hey, listen, you're going to deal with some conflict, guys. When that happens, this is what you do. When you get in conflict, when somebody offends you, when somebody hurts you, this is what you're supposed to do. You ready? Matthew chapter 18, 15 to 20 for your reference. Jesus gives us some steps to follow. Matthew 18, 15 to 20. And I'll tell you what they are. He says, if somebody hurts you and offends you, this is what you are to do. Go talk to them. What a great idea. Go talk to them. Don't go talk to Billy and Frank and Sam and Jamie and all and tell them all that they did to you. No, go to them and have a conversation. And why do you have the conversation? What is the goal of that conversation? To reconcile. If the goal of the conversation is to belittle them and show them that you're better than them and that you're going to rip a strip out of them and walk away and feel so good about yourself, then don't do it. You're going to create more damage. It means you need a little bit more time to rest the soul. When you come to a place of being ready, go have the conversation. Have the conversation. Say, hey, you said that, or you did that, or you didn't do that. And I'm trying to understand where you're coming from, but I just want you to know that that kind of really affected me. And my goal is that we can reconcile this. I want to get to the bottom of this and move on together. At times when you do that, not only are you going to feel a whole big release off of your shoulders because you're holding that hurt in you, but you'll be surprised that they didn't even intend to do that. They did it unintentionally. And you walk out of some of those conversations feeling, oh, I'm so glad I had that conversation. But you know what many of us do? We don't have the conversation. And we bury it. And we don't talk about it. And guess what? If they're sitting on this side, I'm sitting over there. I don't know if that's what the community is supposed to look like. But here's Jesus saying, you know what, you might do that, and it might not work. He says you might go talk to them and try to tell them, hey, what happened was wrong, and we need to, find healing and forgiveness. And they might not listen to you. They might say, what are you talking? Get out of here. Then what do you do? Jesus says this is what you do. You get one or two other friends of yours and go talk to him or her together. So this is where many of us conclude, okay, I got to get 6'5" guys beside me and intimidate this person into doing what I want them to do. No, the point to the one or two others that go with you, as Jesus is instructing us to do, is that you can hopefully show them that not only do you care enough to talk to them, but there's two or three others of you that love them deeply. So much so that you're willing to have the conversation so that at the end of the day, the point is that we could be reconciled, so that we can walk away from these conversations, embracing each other, praying for each other, and becoming a whole lot more Christ-like away from these conversations. Now, Jesus says you might even do that step, and they still don't want to listen to you. They still don't want anything to do with you. What do you do next? Jesus says this is what you do. You tell it to the church. What? Jesus, what are you talking about? That's why sometimes on the keynote we put Jeff has a problem with Billy. No, we don't do that. We don't do that. Basically, what Jesus is teaching us is that sometimes you need to bring spiritual leadership, a pastor, a spiritual leader in your life to come into those conversations and help you mediate the situation. Help you hopefully bring another perspective. Somebody who loves you, somebody who loves them, and they want to see this become this again. And so you have the dialogue. But then Jesus says, you might go all the way to step 3, and guess what? It still doesn't work. Man, this stuff is hard, isn't it? Is it worth all this effort? I'd rather just be ticked off and leave it at that. No. Friendships are worth fighting for. Friendships and relations are worth praying through and having the heart-crucial conversations with each other. So Jesus finally says, if you've gone one-on-one and it doesn't work, if you've brought one or two others and it doesn't work, if you've brought a spiritual leader, a pastor, to come and try to help and it still doesn't work. You see, there's things that pastors get involved in and it doesn't work. Jesus says, if that still doesn't work, you know what you do? Finally, treat him like you would a pagan or a tax collector. Yeah! 3 strikes, you're gone. We're done. Finally, I can get rid of this person. Never talk to them again. Is that what he's saying? So this text is found in the Gospel of Matthew, written by Matthew, which is why it's called Matthew. What was he? What did he do for a living? He was a tax collector, wasn't he? Who did Jesus spend a bulk of his time with apart from the disciples? Sinners, pagans, tax collectors. So when Jesus says, treat him as you would a pagan and a tax collector, what is he saying? Treat him as though he doesn't even know Jesus. Treat him as though you're starting from scratch all over again. Love him even, or love her even more. You see? Nobody deserves to ever be written off forever. Everybody deserves a chance. You're never too far from God's grace. We would agree with that. Thank God for his grace towards me. How dare I limit my grace around people? That's why Jesus says, he was asked, how many times should we forgive? 70 times 7. Some of us take out our calculators. The point is, don't calculate. That's what he was saying. He was saying, don't bother counting. The point is, you should always have enough grace for somebody else because God's always got enough grace for you. Are you getting this teaching? So, friends, there will be conflict amongst us and amongst friends and family members, but Jesus shows us the way. It's worth fighting for. Don't grow lazy of bringing reconciliation, and don't ever believe that somebody's too far for God to intervene in their heart. We got to trust them with him, but we got to do our part too. Friends keep us alive. They say to us, whatever you need, I'm ready to do it. They say you're not going to die. The truth is, God's with you. I'm with you. Let's take that mountain. Let's climb it. Let's not let it defeat us. Pastor Chris, can you come? Team? Oh, friendship, relationship. We're wired for this thing. It's time we start being intentional about it, isn't it? Because if we're not, part of us will literally die. Do you have those friendships in your life that push you to more of God in your life? Are you the kind of friend that does that to somebody else? Remember, it's not about only taking, it's about committing to each other. And I want to say this. May we always be the type of church and community that if you do have friends, there's always room around the table for another friend. Can I say that? Sometimes we get our friends and that's it. Nobody else is allowed in my circle. That's not the Jesus way. The Jesus circle always has another chair for another person. And it's summertime. It's the beginning of summertime. It's going to be summertime. It's barbecue season. Around Heartland, hey, why don't you start inviting some friends in your backyard? Maybe some families or friends that you don't really know. Maybe they're new and you haven't. Get them in your backyard. Maybe there's a neighbor in your neighborhood and you've talked to them and on the driveway, but you've never actually begun a friendship. Maybe this is the season to do that. Maybe God has put you on that street to be that spiritual friend to somebody who so needs it. I was so encouraged in the first gathering. A young lady brought her friend to church from work. First time in church. She was so moved by the Lord today that she came up to me and says, Pastor, I want Jesus in my life. And so this friend brought her to church, and she found Jesus today. Friends do that. Friends do that. If they know their friends are on the tracks, they do whatever they can to make sure they get safe.